the middle camera, beginning.
Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabados of Delmar, and together with my co-host Mark Ronich, a statewide news service, and jbiztechvalley.com, we have a very, very special guest with us, Assemblyman Dov Hikind. Can I call you Dov? The first
for
name
sure.
Dov, welcome to the Jewish View. You know,
My pleasure.
really, I've been here for a number of years in Albany, and really, if I can say that underlying statement, you are the conscience of the Orthodox Jewish community, which is a sizable community, maybe not in Albany, but at least in New York City and the metro New York and the suburbs. And really, you're the voice of the Jewish community for the state.
And I would agree with that.
Boy.
And I would agree.
Wow, that's, well, thank you. I think we all have to have a conscience. I'm not the conscience. Everybody needs to have a conscience and do the right thing and understand what life is all about and what our purpose is every single day. And that's how I try to live my life, to recognize that making a difference is what it is all about, trying to do things and not be afraid, to stand up and to fight for the things that you believe in, regardless of it's not about measuring how the wind is blowing. It's about trying to do what you think is right.
And I'll tell you, for many years, you were the only observant Jew in the State Assembly. Now you have half of a million.
Yeah. Well,
do you feel more comfortable now that you have more people, the younger generation even?
Well, I think it's great. First of all, the idea that there are more observant Jews. There might be Jews who don't look observant, who are as observant as the ones who look observant.
And Orthodox does not always mean observant. You could be conservative and be observant.
No, there's no question that you see a bunch of yarmulkes on the floor of the assembly, and that's sort of a nice sight. I mean, it's nice, and maybe it's a trend. Maybe ultimately we'll actually have a quorum, a minyan. I don't mean a quorum in the assembly, but a minyan to actually daven mincha, to daven the afternoon prayer sometimes. So
and
we'll
then someone will bring up that you can't do it in the Capitol because it's a separation of church and state.
I'm sure there'll be someone who will object to it and say you can't do that.
So well, why don't you tell the audience about your background and how you grew up? And I know your parents were Holocaust survivors.
Right.
So talk about.
Well, I grew up in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. My father and mother, of blessed memory, my father went through the Holocaust, went through a variety of forced labor camps. My mother actually went to Auschwitz in 1944 with her mother, who went straight to the gas chambers. So that's very real to me, and it has influenced my life. So the idea that your grandmother, that you don't have grandparents. I never had grandparents, neither from my father's side nor my mother's side. Knowing that history, knowing what happened, and studying it all the time to this very day. I read and you try to understand how could it happen. And it wasn't just about the bad guys, the Nazis. It was also about a lot of good guys, whether it is the United States under Franklin D. Roosevelt. He was the president at the time, who was extremely popular, in particular among Jews. But Franklin D. Roosevelt was a disaster for the Jewish people. I mean, the history books are there. The information is there. I actually read my first book on this subject 40 years ago, a book by Arthur Morse, While 6 Million Died. And I discovered that, there was Hitler, there was Goebbels, there was Göring, there was Eichmann, all of the Nazis and all the bad guys. But then there were others who stood by, who did nothing, while 10, 11, 12,000 Jews were being murdered every single day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I mean, that's the kind of reality that I try not to forget. It's not just about remembering it once a year. It's my reality.
Did your parents talk to you about it, or was it part of
when
something
when I was very young, my parents never spoke about it. Later on in life, my mother never stopped talking about it. Absolutely. The last number of years that she was alive, She would always talk about it. She would always bring up things that had happened to her in Auschwitz-Birkenau, what had happened to her mother. She used to tell a story about her nephew who was on the line at Auschwitz. You know, you were on a line, and the people like Dr. Mengele and others selected people. If you went to the right, you went straight to the gas chamber. If you went to the left, you might live a little longer. And my mother used to tell the story about her nephew, who was 3 years old, who turned around to the grandmother and said in Yiddish, "Megaitens nicht hargenen?" Are they not going to kill us? A 3-year-old saying, my mother used to repeat the story all the time, and many others. So that part of my parents, I knew what my parents had gone through. I mean, they lost their brothers and sisters, my father, my mother.
Mm-hmm.
So that very much influenced my life in terms of standing up and fighting and trying to not be afraid to do the right thing when it comes especially to the Jewish people.
How old were your parents when they passed away?
My mother passed away only a couple of months ago. She was 95 years old.
Oh, wow.
95. My father passed away. He was close to 90.
Well, my condolences. I'm
Yeah,
sorry
yeah,
I didn't know. What do you teach your children about this experience and hand that down to the next generation? Because there's something being lost.
Yeah,
You know,
there's no question that the new generation that unfortunately, first of all, survivors are disappearing slowly but surely. They're elderly every single day. So, you know, no one can speak the way a survivor
You're
can
right.
speak.
Absolutely.
I mean, I can tell you I read and I saw films and my mother told me, my father told
not
me,
the same.
but the person who was physically there and saw with their own eyes the kind of horrors we can't even imagine. So in my own home, I mean, we live this. My kids, you know, Yoni, Shmuel, and Dina, who just had her sixth, thank God, her sixth child.
Wow.
You know, we always would talk about it, and they would watch the things that I was doing. I mean, being in elective office my 32nd year, but before I was in elective office, I was very active in Jewish, I was a Jewish activist. Some called it a Jewish militant. I was active in JDL, the Jewish Defense League, as an 18, 19, 20-year-old, learning about Soviet Jewry in those days, learning about, you know, standing up to anti-Semitism, and so many other issues.
And
so
the
that's where I
Holocaust-
got my training.
The Holocaust is boiled down to a few pages in a history book, which is shocking.
Yeah, well, listen, you're absolutely correct, and that's why it's incumbent upon us. You know, some people, different parts of the world, they're tired. They don't want to hear about the Holocaust anymore. Enough already. We don't want to hear about the Holocaust. You know, it's a sad reality. You know, has the world changed? Jews during the Holocaust in this country, in this great country,
Right.
they did very little. Some of their leaders, their number one excuse, which is pathetic, they were afraid of causing additional anti-Semitism.
Right.
Now, on one hand, Jews are being murdered in gas chambers. Thousands are being pushed into rivers, being the most horrific things happening to men, women, and children.
And they're letting it
Jews in America were concerned about anti-Semitism. I mean, what were Americans going to do to Jews? Put them to gas chambers? I mean, but that is the number one excuse. That is the excuse, by the way. I mean, really, the excuse, well, Roosevelt couldn't do more because, look, there were a lot of groups, and they were very anti-immigration, they were very anti-this, that. But you know what? Sometimes you have a test.
That's right.
And the test is how you're going to, it's not easy. When it's easy, it's not a big test to do the right thing. But when it's difficult, will you do the right thing?
And we didn't learn from this because in Sudan, millions were being
In Darfur.
killed. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And no one, so the United States as a government didn't learn from the history.
Look at Syria. Up until now, approximately 130,000 Syrian civilians have been murdered. Does anybody care? Is anybody interested? Yeah, it's complicated. Their people were gassed. We remember the pictures.
Yeah.
Did anybody react? Did anything happen as a result? Unfortunately, a lot of terrible things happen in the world, and it's a real test about doing the right thing. We don't want to get involved. But the period of the Holocaust is unprecedented, what happened. The systematic attempt to annihilate every single Jew.
And there were 10 million non-Jews that were killed
Absolutely.
in the Holocaust, and 6 million Jews. But it was a higher percentage of the entire Jewish population.
Yeah,
so that's why it's more dramatic.
No
and
question
shocking.
about it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So let me go to the state legislature and switch gears for a
From
minute.
international to
Yeah,
state.
when you were 30,
It's my 32nd year.
your predecessor was Sam Hirsch?
Right.
Okay. See, I was here then when I remember him. This is my 34th State of the State message
my
that I heard.
goodness.
So I remember Sam. What was your most poignant speech that when you got up on the floor that you can relate and recall the passion that you give when you do get up and speak?
I think that the one that got a lot of recognition for those who agree with me. It's always about if you agree with the person who's making the passionate speech, but the issue of gay marriage. Okay. Speaking about that, and especially the last time we spoke on it publicly, and I was one of the main speakers, and tried to present that in a very dramatic way and in a very passionate way and from my heart. I remember one of the things I said to the assembly. I picked up a part of the Torah.
Right,
I picked up a chumash. And I said to everyone there, without any anger, without any malice, God forbid, that is not what this is all about. And I said, listen, my problem is what it says in this book. It's what God said. Take it up with God, not with me. But that was my position. That is my position. And it will never change because it's based on that. And that is fundamental to me.
Right. And isn't there a separation where you legislate in a secular way, but you personally believe in the core of your heart something religious?
Well, I don't know how one does that, that you separate what is in your heart, your fundamental beliefs, what you believe as a person, and then it comes to policy, you say, well, I'm going to separate the things that are so essential to me in terms of what I believe. I'm going to separate what I believe in, and I'm going to make up my own mind on it and so on.
But it also happens that you vote the way your constituents want you to vote. They send you, and I'm sure your constituents are against gay marriage.
Yeah.
So
I would hope that if my constituents were all for gay marriage, that I would have said exactly what I said on the floor of the assembly.
Do you ever vote?
I'll tell you an interesting story that happened with a member of the assembly who happens to be gay. So there's more than one, I won't tell you who the day after that speech met me in the hallway outside the chamber and came over to me, and I wasn't sure why that person was coming over, and came over and gave me a hug.
Yeah.
And said to me, he said, look, I obviously disagree with the position you've taken, but the way you said it and your integrity, and I know that it's from the heart, I really respect that. It was an incredible moment. I've told that story many times.
And this person's openly gay.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's either Danny O'Donnell or Harry Bronson.
It's
one of the members.
Yeah.
And it's not Danny O'Donnell, so I
okay.
But that happened, and it was a very moving, beautiful moment for someone to take that position.
Yes.
Because, one of the things we all talk about is respecting each other. Now, does that mean only when we agree? Or does that mean even when we disagree on very fundamental issues?
Right.
So it's not...
Well, I remember when Saul Weprin was Speaker, he would have poker games with the opposition, so to speak.
Right.
I mean, you left the chamber, you were still friends. When you got in the chamber, you could disagree.
Look, gay marriage is a very, very emotional, personal issue to people on the other side. And some of them take it very to heart in the sense that they resent people who have a different position or present why they they feel the way they do. And by the way, that's fine with me. Did
you ever talk to David Weprin about why he voted in favor of it and have a discussion of two Orthodox Jews for two different ways?
Look, that sort of became an issue when he ran for the Congress, as you know. I was pretty shocked when he got up and spoke, and I didn't really understand exactly what, look, David and I are friends, good friends. Yeah. But it was surprising, and it was to a lot of people, and it clearly hurt him tremendously in that race. Not in my community, because my community was only a little piece of the congressional district, but in other areas, in Midwood, Flatbush, and so on, it hurt him a lot. And again, I never really had a real detailed discussion. Or put it this way, we had a discussion, but I still don't quite understand.
Okay.
Well, maybe it's political expediency, but he thought the wrong way. If I think, you're popular, just like you were saying with that gay assemblyman, because you hold on if you hold by your principles, then people respect you. They're not going to agree with you all the time, but bottom line. And I think that's even New York State. The man in the street is like that also. I've seen that with politicians. They think they're going to sneak around and they're not popular. They think they're going to lick everybody, and they're not popular. And the people who are popular, we know who you are, we know what you stand for, and those are the more popular people. Everybody respects them.
I assume everybody tries to do the right thing, but as you know, my career, even from a political standpoint, while I'm a Democrat, and it's a real sin for Democrats to support Republicans, I've done it all of my life, and I'm proud of it. It's hard for me, with the history that I'm familiar with my parents, and everything that happened to the Jewish people, to say, I'm a Democrat, and I'm going to support a Democrat, regardless. How can
People
you take
do
that position?
There are people in the Assembly and the Senate who are on both sides, but Democrats who feel the only good Republican is a dead Republican, and Republicans who feel that the only a good Democrat is a dead Democrat. And I've experienced these conversations.
Look,
and how do you get along?
I always used to say that the worst sin that you can commit is crossing party lines. Even though that has changed to a great extent, I mean,
not really, because I worked for the Assembly Republicans, I worked for the Senate Democrats, I worked for other political organizations on both Republican and Democrat side, fundraising and campaigning, and you would think that I committed, the worst sin. But
you're absolutely correct. For me, it doesn't matter.
So do people call you a dino, Democrat in name only?
Not to me,
not
to my face.
Not to your face?
Behind my back, I'm sure they say a lot of things.
Okay.
Which is fine.
So let me ask you, how do you get along with Simcha Felder? Because you're in the state
Great
Senate. Because your districts overlap.
Not only overlap, Simcha was my chief of staff for over 10 years.
Okay.
So when he ran for the city council, of course, I was there 100% supporting him, and he's a good guy and straight guy and does a lot of good stuff. He's he's a mensch.
Urge him to come on the show. We'd love to have him here.
Sure, I'll tell him. Have you asked him?
we've had discussions,
Okay,
yes, as you
okay.
said.
So let me ask you, what are the issues right now? So we're running out of time, and probably we'd love to talk to you for hours over here, but it just, I mean, you've done a lot of big issues. That's why I started off saying for the Jewish community, Orthodox Jewish community. What are issues now that are on the table?
I'm not sure there's any one particular thing that affects the Jewish community in particular right now that we're dealing with. There's an issue that involves New York City special education, that a bill that was passed 2 years ago that is extremely important for New York City.
The special needs education?
Yeah, exactly,
Special
precisely.
needs,
In fact, it was passed by the Assembly and the Senate. It was vetoed by the governor 2 years ago. Last year, it didn't even come out of the Assembly. That's something very important that we're working on. But look, it's about trying to get whatever we can for the needs of the community. And a lot of those needs are needs for everyone, for all communities. In my community, there are a lot of people who are very well off. Borough Park, Flatbush, you can go down the streets and see the most magnificent homes. But there are even more people who are below the poverty level. And sometimes people look at the Jewish community, the old, everybody, they don't need subsidized housing. They don't need, no, the truth is they need it as much as any other community. A majority of our community are people who are poor, large families. And that's not a complaint. Large families are beautiful. People say, my daughter has 6 so far. And people say, 6, my God. I always say that sometimes people have 1.
13.
Sometimes people have 1 and they can't take care of 1. And sometimes you have 6 or 13. And they're all taken care of, and and everybody helps and everybody chips in.
It's not only that. I just saw a recent report that takes $1 million to raise. I don't have $1 million, I'm telling you, and my kids are all right. But, that's what scares people, I mean,
absolutely.
just like you say, do the right thing, and you'll be all right. That's it. But it takes a lot of, just to give it takes a lot of courage. You're just saying, okay, I just do the right thing because that's the way I was raised, that's the way I feel. But on the other hand, that's what I'm saying, a lot of people, and I would even say majority of people, just, okay, I'm going to get in trouble, I'll assimilate, or I'll just make it easy for myself. Oh, it's going to cost me money. Okay, they'll back down. Most people back down when they hear the gory, you can get in trouble. People look at you askance.
That's not my problem.
Well,
I know it's not yours, but I think it's the majority of other people.
Which committees are you on?
I'm not in any committees for the past. Yeah, I mean, I used to be on 6 major committees.
Why have you?
It was my own decision so that I could devote my time. I don't do anything else besides this.
Right.
I have a radio show.
Besides this, meaning being a legislator.
Exactly.
So why
I do
are
this
you not
full-time.
on any assembly committees?
Yeah, I'd rather not make a statement
asking.
because I don't want to, God forbid, say anything that other people are on committees in any way. I found after being on committees for the first 15 years that I could, in my case, I could use my time doing other things that are very important for my community.
Okay.
Because, again, being on that committee doesn't really influence one way or the other what's going to happen.
Well, your seniority, you're probably one of the more senior
if you want, it doesn't really matter, to me.
I never
and
knew.
God forbid, do I want to, in any way say anything
no,
that...
I understand. You don't want to be negative to someone, but
That's
you're
exactly.
talking on the positive
Precisely,
side of why
precisely.
you didn't want to affirm it.
Precisely.
But so... Okay, so when you what's your top bill that you have in the...
Well, right now I have a bill that is really important. We do a lot of bills in Albany, thousands and thousands. And sometimes at the end of the session you say, what did we do in Albany? And you find it hard to find.
So what's yours?
So there's a bill that I actually passed 2 years ago that we're working very hard to get the Senate to pass it. It's a great bill for New York. It could be for other communities.
But what is it?
Let me tell you what it is. It basically involves when a big problem is sanitation tickets that people get. Your sidewalk is dirty.
Yes.
You get a sanitation ticket. People argue, my sidewalk wasn't dirty. I clean it, and so on and so forth. This bill would require sanitation enforcement agents to take a picture of the violation. This way no one can argue. And it's something that's being done by other agencies. Today, with the technology that is available, this is a fabulous thing. And in fact, when we introduced this, we had a huge press conference that was every TV station, all the newspapers, basically where we had 3 cases of sanitation agents giving tickets. We had video. Don't ask me how we got it. We got different videos showing the agents walking over to a building, giving a ticket. There was nothing there. Or kicking a garbage and then saying that there was stuff in the garbage thing that wasn't supposed to be, because you're supposed to keep the bottles separate. So we had this amazing, it was watching enforcement agents doing things that were terrible, because you ended up with a $150 violation. So this bill would solve that problem.
Well, I think we're out of time, and Rabbi, you want to give him a blessing?
Well, we have blessing because you're good Orthodox Jews. Like I say at the beginning, you're the conscience of Orthodox Judaism and the Assembly. Keep it up. You're the conscience, really, and that also is extrapolation of the conscience of the people of New York State, because you're standing for Torah topics, and therefore then that's really good for all humanity, and not just for the Jews and not for the Orthodox Jews, but really for all New York State. Keep it up with our blessings, with good health.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you so much.